The remodeled B-Spec Mercedes W14 car is finally out. We finally get something to go off of for really what we've been talking about with these upgrades for so long. And I'm not going to analyze it in where I think the performance is going to be extracted because we won't genuinely know till Spain. But I want to talk about everything we do know and really the basis of the car and how much it has changed and where they took, I think, from each other team some philosophy changes and how they can be going in the right direction with this really new car. First of all, what I want to talk about is its looks. I love the look of the car. It's a bit odd when you look at it from the side because they kept that little wing type flap up top that was required for the no side pod design to really control its airflow. They kept that and still pushed back their side pod, so for most other teams, their side pods are a lot further up than the actual W14, but because of the chassis not being changed, it does look a little bit odd from the side. But to me, it looks way more Formula-like. Like the car just looks a lot more, I don't know, even aggressive, I would say. I liked the no side pod design, and I actually, like, when I made my top 10 chassis before, it was my #1, but just that much more, I like the way that the car looks. It's definitely got inspiration from a lot of different cars. I mean, when we look at it, it's still really a Mercedes concept. The car hasn't changed much in the aspect of it's the smallest side pods. It's their own thing, but they've picked up on a few things that we're going to talk about and I think can really help them either into the season, but also what these few changes actually mean for the car. The first change being, let's talk about this back shot of the side pod. So when we're looking at it here, you can definitely tell that there are some philosophies picked up from other teams. Now, the first team that most people are going to mention is Aston Martin. And while I do find that true, I don't necessarily think that this part right here is followed as closely by Aston Martin. First of all, their cooling gills, they're put into the front. So I think they're expecting that airflow to go either differently, cool off the car, or they're having it come out from some other way. Just like the actual top part, where you can see the cooling gills, I'll point an arrow out to it, on its top engine cover part, that was also used for airflow in a particular way. It does follow a little more closely, I think, the Alpine design. That is what I would really go off of this side pod design. There is a part on here that when we go a little bit more into the side pod and talking about it, that I think it follows a lot more closely the Aston Martin part than it does for Alpine. But clearly, it does look like a new base that they're adding even with the side pod. There's a lot to be added here, a lot more that they can extract from this. It's still very simplified, but it is definitely new. We can't obviously see that underfloor of it, but that's where I think we really have this B-Spec version off of looks, yes. But the actual outside that we can't see is where I think the car has majorly changed in general. Now here is the shot that when I saw this, I was like, oh, it's an aggressive looking car. It looks mean, I like it. But there's a lot of things that we can pick up from here. First of all, the floor is still very exposed. It's still a very big floor in comparison to a lot more teams. But this is what I wanted to talk about as to how it's more closely associated with the Aston Martin. So side pod, yes. But the actual gap between the engine cover and the side pod, they took that practically out of the notebook of Aston Martin. They have that really big gap there in between and it controls a lot of its airflow. I think this is the same thing they picked up on and a lot of other teams don't really run this type of design concept. A lot of people were also comparing it to the MCL60. I don't see that. But it's very simple there because airflow is going through there, but also the like almost identical part to it. The almost identical part to it is the way that really that blank space between the engine cover and the side pod, but also as you can see the floor going into its, let's call them slide pods by the end of it. The floor going into its slide pods with its engine cover, the way that that all kind of intertwines is the exact same thing Aston Martin has. And that controls a lot of its downforce and gives it that real beauty of the medium and the slow speed corners. Obviously that is a part of the car, so there's a lot more things involved into it to give it that real performance. It's not just one little thing or a couple few things. It's a whole combination of things. They do have an undercut, and it almost looks like the exact same undercut for the Aston Martin as well from the side when you're looking. Now, it's a little bit less of an undercut in certain little aspects because the actual side pod and the whole way that it's really made is a lot shorter than the Aston Martins and other teams really on the grid. but it does still have an undercut, but it still has that pretty crazy floor. So obviously they have picked up a thing or two when it comes to the floor and how they can change it to involve this real different philosophy, really. Next picture, just a closer picture, really talking about the way that the wing goes into the side pod. And yeah, how I mentioned it before, it still has that kind of W14 no side pod-esque. It's just a bit different. They obviously did add a couple of other parts to kind of control its airflow. Now we'll see how much more this is involved when it's actually performing on the track. Not Monaco, but Spain will be the biggest things. And there's more to come really with this package. This is a picture that I wanted to show you, like very much so, how this looks like with the Aston Martin. I'll actually put them side by side. I'll put them side by side and I'll show you exactly where really their whole concept is really coming from in this idea. It's to really promote that floor. And if you look at the floor and the way that the whole concept looks like, I'll point arrows to it, it just goes all the way to the beam wing, giving it that like extra efficient effect. And this is something that only really Aston Martin has really picked up on, and Red Bull. It's a lot of other teams have not really been able to incorporate this. Now, can Mercedes really extract full performance out of it? I hope they can, but the reason why this engine cover to side pod is so blank and so really there's not much to it is for this reason alone. So it's able to extract that air to get it to its beam wing, giving it less drag, hopefully. There is more things that's involved here, but that is the basis of it. When you look at it, this picture, you can very much see what they were trying to go for with this design concept. And the way that even the undercut that they have going under the side pod with its other part of the floor going up into its part of its side pod into the back of the floor, I'll point an arrow to there as well. It just shows you what they're trying to go for with this concept. It's a lot more obvious than the actual no side pod design. It's something that you can just see off of the eye instead of really relying on the upper floor with a lot of little edges and stuff. Obviously, it's still a very extremely made upper floor. It's just a beauty to look at though too. That is another thing, but now they have even less paint on this car, which is insanity. But obviously, hey, maybe the car weighs a little bit more now, so let's see that. Next picture, and this is a big talking point that I really want to bring out. The actual suspension and the way that it's made is drastically different to a lot of other teams on the grid. Now, a lot of people are talking about really that anti-dive and what it can really perform for the team. And yeah, if we look at the Red Bull car, what it really extracts in that Red Bull car is that the Red Bull car is able to pull its best performance with that because of how much it's really able to just kill those brakes. I already used the example before. If you're to brake on your bikes as hard as possible and you lean forward, essentially that is what the Red Bull is really going for. Obviously you can see from Monaco to Miami, this is the change in the car, really, the suspension and how it is done and how it performs. This change here is drastic because they are going for that. It's a bigger, really, the way that they've kind of put out their suspension is different to others. The way that the airflow now is trying to be dictated through the suspension. There is a picture up. Let me see if I can find it, but I know how it looks like in my head anyways. It's 4 different cars. It's the Ferrari, the Aston Martin, Red Bull, and Mercedes. And actually the Ferrari and the Mercedes are the most similar to any other car when it comes to suspension, especially in the front. And yeah, they probably have a great rear suspension, so that helps them with really their tire management and stuff. But this will help with tire management, being able to brake a lot harder, and really extract more performance out of the car, as we can see with Red Bull. But it will make it, this is my prediction, it will make it harder for them to set up the car. So I'm telling you, Monaco is going to be a tricky race for them to really extract its full performance, but they can pick up on data points. It is the only team that I have seen, though, pick up on its suspension like this and really make its front nose part still go into its floor. Unlike any other team, really, the way that it is molded into its front nose. Here's just another picture to just show even more like what I am talking about. It's just that extraction. They had it before, but now it's even more updated to their new concept that is out. This was kind of ready to be involved into this W14 no side pod design. So expectations, like I talked about in my other video, should not be high, but this is everything we really need to know about the car as of right now. It's real undercut that it has, the way that it's changed its philosophy, and what team it's really closely followed, which is the Aston Martin car. So I hope that we get a lot more performance from the car. I hope that we get a killer Monaco race, and I will be covering it this weekend. And I will cover this car when we get some performance actually extracted out of it. So thank you all so much for supporting. Thank you so much for supporting on the channel whenever you guys can. And please leave a like, subscribe. It would mean the world, and peace.